Just to give folks, I'm guessing a lot of y'all are familiar with Bikepacking Roots already, but so my name is Noelle Battle. I'm the executive director of Bikepacking Roots. I've been in this role for about 2.5 years, but we're a 501(c)(3) national nonprofit. Have just expanded a little bit to Canada this year as well, focused on growing and supporting the bikepacking community. We do that through route creation, through community events and educational programming, and also through advocacy, both on behalf of the bikepacking community and for protection of the landscapes and places where we love to ride. So this webinar is focused on, as I'm sure you all know, and we're intrigued to join, exploring some of our routes in the Southwest, in Arizona and New Mexico. And we have two wonderful route creators here, Forrest Radarian and Matt Mason. I'll let them introduce themselves in just a minute. And then, yeah, this is the third of our webinar series. We are trying to do this quarterly. And so we've done our first webinar was our co-founders, Kate and Kurt, hosted a webinar talking about our Bears Ears route. And then we did a special webinar with the folks from Ride with GPS, more about diving into route planning. And I know I saw from some of your registration questions that's something you're more interested in. So definitely go check out those webinars on our YouTube. We have two different webinars with Ride with GPS that you can find. And I'll make a little plug because people always drop off by the end of the webinar. But we did happen to just launch our fall fundraising campaign. As I said, we're a nonprofit and all of our donations really come from individuals like y'all and our brand partners. But if you appreciate what we're doing, we really try to make all these educational resources and a lot of the other programming, our route materials, free for everyone and accessible. So we rely on support from folks like you. We did just launch this really cool new T-shirt for public lands that we're doing a lot of advocacy for at the moment. So with that, I will jump into our discussion. So we're going to spend the first maybe 20 minutes of this call just getting to know our route creators a little bit. What got them into bikepacking and creating routes to share with the public. And then each of them is going to present on their routes for about one particular route that they've created for about 20 minutes. And then so hopefully there'll be some time for Q&A at the end. So we'll start by if each of y'all can just give us an introduction and maybe a little bit of your background about how you got into bikepacking. Maybe Forrest, do you want to go first?
Hi, my name is Forrest Radarian. I live at the south rim of Grand Canyon National Park. I'm actually a public school teacher. I teach high school science here at the public school located in the park. Um, that's a little bit about me. I first got into bikepacking back in 2015. If we want to say bike touring, it's just a paved version of bikepacking. I had a friend of mine who did a bike tour from Canada to Mexico along the Pacific Coast Highway. And when he told my wife and I that he was going to spend his summer break as a teacher doing that, we both looked at him and were like, dude, what are you talking about? Riding a bike from Canada to Mexico? How's that even possible? And he was like, oh yeah, I'm going to put my gear in these bags. And I was just flummoxed, but also drawn into what he was doing. And he took like a bunch of videos. He came back and I just looked at them all and I was like, this is one of the most incredible things I've ever heard of. And we decided to then in 2015 do a bike tour ourselves. In terms of unpaved bike packing on dirt, that began a few years later. On that 2015 bike tour, we ended up getting hit by a car about 6 days from the end of our ride. And afterwards, ended up being okay. But we had a lot of reflections about how we wanted to adventure by bike in the outdoors. And I think around that time, the word bike packing began to drift across my radar. And the more I dug into it, the more I was like, ooh, I really like this. Being on dirt, way out in the middle of nowhere, this is a great combination of things I love. So, in terms of inspiring myself to create bikepacking routes, uh, I first published Capes of the Canyon, which is a route here I have published on the south and north rims of the Grand Canyon. And it was kind of due to my desire to explore the Grand Canyon region to remote lookouts that I certainly don't have a car or vehicle to get to, but I knew I could get to on a bike. And the more I started to explore these different areas, the more I began to realize that this is something I love to share with my friends and with others. And so kind of that passion for bike packing creation, route creation grew from there. My approach to route making centers on going to all the locations that I really want to see of an area. I kind of have this philosophy when I am designing a route in an area, getting really to know it. I want to assume that I will never come back to this area again. I do, but just in case something happens in life or whatever. So if I'm going to spend a lot of time there, I really want to go around and see everything. And when I've done that, then I think to myself, what would other people like to see too? So I actually spend quite a bit of time poring over physical maps from the Forest Service or the BLM, national park maps here at the canyon. I end up reaching out to locals who have done a bunch of riding in the area. I go out and do a ton of scouting. I can't tell you the number of times I've gone and ridden a section that I think will just be absolutely beautiful. And then I get there and it's actually like a dead end, or this road no longer exists, no matter how beautiful it looked on a map, or a water source that I thought this is going to be reliable. So scouting is an important part of this process. And then also follow up with making sure that I reach out to even some of the public land agencies in the area, and I'll often converse with them, get their input on different areas. They have a wealth of knowledge about where water sources and favorable sites can be located. And I start to put that together. And so a lot of my routes tend to weave and wrap and kind of like loop back around. And today's wrap specifically does that. And that's because I really am trying to build that sense of topophilia, that like love for an area in some way. And I hope to kind of share that with others as well. So that's my approach in this case. Thanks, Noel.
Awesome. That's great. I was gonna say, yeah, I've seen your routes and I know, yeah, they're very circuitous, and that is great because it's not always just about getting from point A to point B as fast as possible. So that's cool. Yeah. Matt, you want to go ahead?
Yes, my name's Matt Mason. I live currently in Las Cruces, New Mexico. I've been in the desert. I lived in Arizona for a while, probably 20 years now in the desert after growing up in Iowa. Um, I'm a stay-at-home dad. I have been a stay-at-home dad for close to 15 years now. So that gives me time to, do this volunteer stuff with Bikepacking Roots and Outdoor Alliance while my kids are at school or asleep. So that's keeping me busy, and I have a lot of fun doing that. I got into bikepacking probably 2011. I've been a thru hiker for a long time. And then as I started to have kids, my time was much more limited. So I didn't have time to drive to the trailhead and then have an adventure and then drive home. And I thought, well, I heard a little about bikepacking, mainly from Kurt and Kate. And I thought, okay, this is something I can start the adventure at the front door, get to public land, have an overnighter, and come back quickly. My first trip was on a 3-speed commuter bike with a basket on the front that I rode to school. So I just piled all my stuff in that front basket, put a small backpack on, and rode 15 miles maybe to the mountains north of Las Cruces and spent the night. It was an amazing trip, and I've been doing that ever since. What were the other questions? Forrest, sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, yes, I muted myself. What inspired you to get into creating routes and sharing
Oh,
them?
yeah. Okay. Yeah. So my first route was the Monumental Loop, and I made it before I got into bikes, really. So 2009, I wasn't a bike packer. I did mountain bike. I commuted a lot. I rode bikes essentially every day, but had not gone bike packing. And there was a debate in Las Cruces at the time about wilderness areas. And to get to know those lands better, I said, oh, I'm going to hike them and create this hiking route. So that was sort of how the loop started, was as a hiking route. Since then, I've just sort of made routes where I wanted to go, tried to add something to the area and tell the full story of an area. So I'll make them, include a lot of small towns and try to contribute something to the local economy instead of just having riders blow through and not really get to know the people or the place. I'm trying to show them sort of the full picture of what an area has to offer. And I think that riders seem to pick up on that. And the businesses along the route really, really love it. So that works. And there was a third one. What was
Your approach to route making? Anything else to add?
my approach has changed. You'll see when I present on the Monumental Loop, my approach has changed over the years. I try to set myself aside. What I want to do is generally not what most people want to do, and I've come to accept that. So like I said, I'm trying to tell the story of an area. I'm trying to show people what it has to offer in a route that makes sense. So something that flows together, that's easy. The bulk of bike packers don't really want to go out and just hammer all day long. They want to have nice places to camp. They want to see beautiful places. They want to eat delicious food. So I'm trying to sort of hit that sweet spot of it's a little challenging, but when it's the most challenging, it's the most beautiful. And then try to make people happy, I guess. I did a lot of not making people happy. So I'm sort of migrating over to pleasing some people here. And it's been working.
Awesome. Got to find the right balance of hiking with your bike, which I know you don't mind doing.
No, but it's not that fun. And I've gotten older, so it's gotten a little easier to, oh, okay, I can relax and we can have fun out here.
Well, awesome. Well, I know you both have a lot to share about your routes. We're going to focus today on one particular route or kind of evolution of a route from each of these folks. So Forrest, you want to take it away?
For sure. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and there we go. Can I get a thumbs up if y'all can see that from my panelists? Great. All right, so my name is Forrest Radarian. This is a picture from actually my North Rim Capes of the Canyon route. This is like one of the capes that you'll see along that route is Point Imperial. But I'm going to talk to you all today about El Lobo Lupus, which is actually located in eastern Arizona. So I'm going to start off with a question for everyone who's in our audience. Pull up the comments, click it open underneath the chat. And what I want you to do is just kind of note to yourself, like, what are some of the kind of impressions about the landscapes and vegetation that you think come to mind when you think of Arizona? Literally throw it in the chat. I'm going to give you like 30 seconds. Oh, I love it. I see the comment about every plant wants to eat you from Paul. That is certainly something I have felt before in Arizona. I see a lot of comments regarding the aridity of the area, some of the cacti, etc. But I also see some people mentioning some of the forests and mountains that are located in this state. When I first moved to Arizona, oh gosh, like 17 years ago now, I moved to Phoenix, and I quickly realized that yes, in Phoenix it was quite dry and hot. But the more I began to explore around the state, the more I was kind of blown away by the diversity of different biomes and ecosystems that are found throughout the state. I like to say that if you take your car and you point it in any direction and drive 2 hours, you could be in a completely different environment in some way. One of those places that kind of came to mind for me, that one of my friends introduced me to, were the White Mountains of Eastern Arizona. So in Eastern Arizona, which is where I ended up making a Lobo Lupus here. This is first a screenshot of the route with a bunch of waypoints here, but this is kind of a cleaner map without all the waypoints added. There's a series of mountain ranges that make up what's known as the San Francisco Mountains, the Blue Range, Mogollon Rim, the White Mountains. And it's this high elevation terrain that is unique to some extent for Arizona and the Southwest. This is an area that is often rich in water. It has a lot of flowing streams, creeks. It has some reservoirs that have been dammed up, but water nonetheless. And I spent some time kind of biking through this area over the years with some friends of mine. And I began to dream of kind of putting together a route. And it was the route that eventually became a Lobo Lupus. And you can see a lot of pictures of my wife and I out on this route. I kind of pulled it from one of the big rides we did in the area when we were kind of putting the route together. But you can see some standing ephemeral water. This is kind of early summer, late spring in this case. We got aspen, we've got pine in the distance. We have these kind of high subalpine meadows located around here. And as I was riding through here, I kept thinking, man, I really would love to spend an extended amount of time in this area on a bike, and thus led to kind of creation of this route. So I'm going to jump back to the route overview. Riders on the route actually start in the town of Pinetop Lakeside. I used to have it start in Show Low, but I've been able to kind of make some good networking relationships with some local businesses to allow some parking in the area. So Pinetop is a much more conducive area start, but both Pinetop and Show Low are just fantastic spots to start exploring the White Mountains. Riders do a loop out and around, where they begin to come down to the small community of Greer. They'll climb from about 7,000 feet upwards to around like 8 to 9 and then back down again 1,000 feet. And they kind of make their way around this kind of high country down to high desert around Springerville and Eager. They go to the Sipe White Mountain area, climb back up into the mountains, stop in the small community of Alpine, do a loop of some famous peaks we'll talk about in a minute, drop down to Blue around the southern end of the route, which is off the Mogollon Rim. It's the lowest point of the route at just over 5,000 feet. Climb back up, make their way out to the Blue Vista lookout, and then eventually kind of return on the loop to Lakeside. So I want to give you kind of a visual start to what you can expect to see on a Lobo Lupus. First, this is around the small community of Vernon, which will be hit up by most cyclists on day one. There are a mixture of like pavement and really, really nice gravel roads found in this area. And if you get a chance to bike through here in early summer, late spring, there are just large fields of irises growing up in a lot of the meadows. Camping is abundant along this route. You can disperse camp in almost any place you can think of throughout the public lands here, except for a few minor exceptions. But like much of the Southwest, there are large ponderosa pine stands where you kind of have this park-like quality with grasses growing up underneath them. And it just makes terrific spots for tent camping. The route often goes through aspen as well on broad dirt roads, as this picture over here shows. It also travels through some single track known as the Apache Railroad Trail, which is located here. This is kind of a better section of it. Some of the Apache Railroad Trail is quite overgrown and grassy, but this is a lovely portion that goes through some aspen trees. And then it kind of exits the woods and goes out into these large kind of subalpine meadows. It does make its way south and east towards the Sipe White Mountain Wildlife Area, which is more of a pinyon grassland environment, before also making its way to some high points along the route, including this mountain. This is Escudilla. a very tall, over 10,000 feet in elevation mountain. And part of the ride actually goes up it. This is on top of Escadilla. And then it does descend to a more kind of desert-like environment with rugged rocks are exposed. Kind of reminds me of Sedona a little bit along Blue. You'll see signs throughout the route. If we bring our attention over here to the Mexican wolf reintroduction area, this is sort of the inspiration for the route that I'll get to in a little bit. And it also does travel along the eastern and across the western forks of the Black River, which are permanent streams and rivers found in the area. So a few highlights of this route, like why should you ride this? What would you see if you came out to Eastern Arizona? First, this is miles of high elevation montane and subalpine zones in the Alps of Arizona. They provide a rare Southwestern summer bikepacking trip. I think the best time to ride this route, and we'll get into seasons later, are like early summer and even fall, but there's definitely, I've ridden in this area in the summer and I know other bikepackers have too. The whole point about this route is to really take in a lot of the wildlife that's found in the area. So this route's called El Lobo Lupus. The Mexican gray wolf is the most endangered kind of subspecies or species of the gray wolf, Canis lupus, found across the United States. And the species was extirpated from Arizona and then reintroduced in the 90s. And now their range kind of extends across both western New Mexico and eastern Arizona in the high country. And the population sits at roughly somewhere over 200 or so at this time. And this route really is an attempt to take riders through all the different areas where these wolves kind of extend and hopefully give you some viewing or listening opportunities. El Lobo Lupus also goes up to or around the bases of Escadilla and Baldy, which are some of the highest mountains in Arizona outside of the Flagstaff region, which has Humphreys Peak. You get to visit the White Mountains, the Blue Range, which is the last federal kind of non-wilderness area. It's like a primitive zone. There's some efforts to definitely turn it into a wilderness area, but it's still kind of classified as primitive. And along the Mogollon Rim of eastern Arizona. You'll get to go along the headwaters of the east and west forks of the Little Colorado River. In fact, there's a portion where riders get to go down, and that water that gathers in a stream right next to the Apache Railroad Trail will eventually make its way all the way west to the Grand Canyon and merge with it at the famous kind of confluence of the Colorado and Little Colorado rivers. You get to visit small mountain towns of Greer and Alpine. And there's also lots of reservoirs that are stretched across the White Mountains. So if you're into fishing, this is a great opportunity. This is an area that has a lot of Gila and Apache trout. And so for those who are interested in bike fishing, bring a pole. You get to go to Sipe White Mountain Wildlife Area, which I think is a really cool spot. It has elk, a lot of deer, and lots of great birding. You get to ride up to 10,000 feet along Terry Flat to take a loop on the top of Escadilla Mountain. You get to go down to Blue, Arizona along the Blue Range Primitive Area. You get to bike and camp along the shores of the east and west forks of the Black River. There's this little famous spot along the southern edge of the route called Hannigan Meadow that is kind of famous in Arizona for its greenery and lushness. There's a lodge right across from there that you can stay at in a nearby campground. And then Big Lake is a big destination in the White Mountains for those who are looking to boat or angle or just have some great camping opportunities. And finally, there are several different fire towers located across the route that riders can ride up to. Lots of them are open during the summer. You can walk up and they're all staffed and you can kind of talk to the people who are in charge of kind of looking for smoke. And they have some fascinating stories to share. So some further pictures here. There's some old cabins that are found along the route as well that you can stop and take a look at. The route will stretch along some smaller streams and creeks that often will dry by late summer, but in early summer, they're flushed and filled with water. This is a picture of the East Fork of the Black River here. There's a lot of designated campgrounds along this section where you can spend the night. I highly suggest Diamond Rock Campground. It's a beautiful area, and bighorn sheep will come down into this canyon, and you can just be sitting at your tent site, and a big herd of like 20 of them will be eating from the vegetation or drinking from the river. It's pretty incredible. This mountain here is Escadilla, which is famous for the fact that this is where Aldo Leopold did a lot of his rangering, and he was stationed at a fire lookout on the top of this mountain. There's several chapters in his Sand County Almanac where he talks of his experiences in the area. Escadilla was also the location of the last grizzly bear in the state of Arizona that was shot in the early 1900s. And you can ride along the base of this mountain on El Lobo Lupus. And at one point, you'll go up to about 10,000 feet right here. That's my wife. And actually kind of see it a little closer. And if you want, you can also take the side hike to the actual top. This is a picture of Hannigan Meadow. This is kind of breaking the stereotype that sometimes people have about Arizona, of it being only arid and dry. The large elevations in this part of the state provide an opportunity for moisture accumulation, and it is just freaking beautiful as a result. Big Lake can be found over here, which is that large reservoir I spoke about earlier. So you may be thinking to yourself, like, why would you want to, do this route? Or why did I design this route in some ways? So when I went out to make it, I wanted it to wrap and weave through the heart of the Mexican wolf or El Lobo territory. And my dream was to definitely see or hear wolf. And I have definitely heard wolves out there. I've seen their paw prints. I've yet to see one though. This is an area known as the Alps of Arizona. It's kind of become the local motto for Alpine, the little town along the route. And so it was a great place to go to in the summer to escape the heat from the lower portions of our state. And I wanted to see everything that was found in the White Mountains. A little personal history. This is like me, like, I don't even know, like 12 years ago. And when I set out to come here, a good friend of my wife and I invited us to come up over a Labor Day weekend. And we had gone to Flagstaff a bunch of times, and Flagstaff is an incredible place. But the idea that there were big mountains in eastern Arizona just, I don't know, didn't click with us until he brought us here, and we were absolutely blown away by it. We rode a bunch of single track in the area. We did some rides on a lot of the dirt roads. And then we kind of made a tradition to go back year after year and kind of explore this area more and more over Labor Day and other extended holidays. So El Lobo Lupus also traverses lots of different environments. I've just got a small picture of some right here. It's got conifer woodlands and savannas. It's got montane conifer forests, which you can see here with the firs and spruce and aspen dispersed throughout them. It also has some of the subalpine forests that are unique to the southwestern, kind of western New Mexico, eastern Arizona area. There's montane and subalpine grasslands. There's the semi-arid tablelands, which are more kind of grassy in appearance. You have these transition zones. We also have these Madrean lower montane woodlands. This is like a picture coming up from blue right here, which is a little bit more arid. It's a great spread of different environments. I do want to note though that a lot of this land is public, but it is also the adjacent to and like right across the current and traditional home to several tribes, the White Mountain Apache, the San Carlos Apache, the Pueblo Zuni. In fact, portions of this route will go up right against their official kind of modern day reservations. But know that this is definitely where their traditional land extended to. You can go also do some biking on their reservations. They have some nice online kind of applications for permits that you can do, which is really nice. The main public land for El Lobo Lupus is the Apache Sicus National Forest. And so most of this route goes through there. So again, you have wonderful kind of dispersed camping opportunities. So some stats on the route. I suggest taking 9 to 12 days to ride this route. Now I ride at a touring pace. I like to go anywhere from 35 to 55 miles a day, depending upon the elevation gain. And I like to take 0 days when I get to cool little towns. And there are certainly some of those along this route. People can definitely go faster. I know someone just finished it earlier this summer and they rode the whole thing in like 5.5 days. The route in total is a little over 400 miles with around 35,000 feet of gain. Physically, the difficulty by bikepacking route scale is a 6. Technically, it's a 5. You will have some small sections of single track and rougher surface, but overall, most of the roads along the route are well maintained. I suggest a tire size of around 2.2 to 2.6 inches. Some people will definitely go smaller and they'll kind of take this on as a more speedy route on a gravel bike. I like a little bit more comfort myself. That's just kind of my personal preference. Most of the route is smooth gravel and some sections of rough gravel. And again, seasons here in the Southwest, like our early summer or late spring is like late May to June. In fact, a lot of the businesses along this route won't be open until late May. Once it hits Memorial Day, that's when they really start having more consistent open hours. This is the high country, so snow and kind of muddy conditions can even extend to late May. Midsummer, you can totally do it. Just be prepared to be a little hotter, and there's a lot more opportunities for monsoons to hit. September through mid-October, beautiful time to see this area. Aspens are changing. It's absolutely gorgeous, but about October 15th, you are going to find that businesses start to close up for the season. And that's exactly what you want to think about when you're riding this route. I've had people reach out to me before and ask if they could ride it in July, and I'll say, go for it. I've done a ton of riding in the area in July. Just know that when you get to the lower portions of the route, around Blue and Springerville and Eager, you're going to have some hotter conditions with a lot less shade. There are several burn scars you will ride through. You can kind of see one here. This is from the Wallow Fire, which is the largest fire to happen in Arizona history. And so when you ride through there, it will be a bit more hot. But if you can bring good water, you know how to regulate yourself in those hot conditions, go for it. If not, I suggest that kind of early summer / autumn conditions. What's unique about this route is the fact that there is quite a bit of water along here. So this is the West Fork of the Black River. There's actually a nice kind of more primitive campground nearby the Forest Service runs. You can expect to get water in a lot of the small towns, but streams like this are often permanent. There are also several springs along the route that I've noted that you can find water if there has been good winter precipitation or good summer monsoons. There may be smaller creeks that you will cross along the route as well that in early summer will be thick with water. Late summer, you should expect those to be a little drier. I always bring a bit of water with me when I'm in the Southwest bikepacking, lest I have an issue with mechanical or otherwise, just to take care of myself. But for the most part, this is a relatively water-rich area. Food can be located at a lot of the small towns along the route. About 60 miles or so in, riders hit Greer. It's a small community. There's like a little general store, a couple of restaurants, some lodging. You'll go through Eager and Springerville, which has like Safeway and Abasha's, which is like a local Arizona chain for groceries. There's lots of restaurants there. Alpine, about 150 miles in, has a little country store and tackle shop gas station. There's also some restaurants. Riders do a loop around and have the opportunity to do a detour back to Alpine again, where they can stock up. That's what I do when I'm on the route. Once you leave Alpine, though, it's a bigger stretch to Big Lake, which is the next really reliable source, over 100 miles here. You can't stop at Hannigan Meadow, where there is a lodge. There's a restaurant only. Don't expect any groceries there. I think in the past I've seen them sell like maybe some little small bags of chips, but it wouldn't be something I would suggest. Big Lake is going to have a full general store and tackle shop. It's a large kind of sought after area for people who camp. And so there's a lot of food that you can choose from there. And then you finish the loop back in Pine Top and Lakeside, which have a Safeway and many, many restaurants to take a look at. The bottom picture is kind of a distant picture of the small town of Alpine. This is at like 8,000 feet. And this is actually a store right here, this little white building, where you can find some good food. I do want to warn riders on the route, though, that the beauty of the mountains will come with some difficulty. There's a lot of climbing on this route. As I mentioned, like 35,000 feet of gain. And with that, you can expect to have lots of temperature swings. On the lower portions of the route, like this is climbing up from blue. This is a significant climb. You're going to be going through these kind of red rock exposed, pinyon juniper kind of montane environments that they'll transition to. This is a hot area. And you're going to have to climb way back up to those high elevations. But if you want to see the beauty of the Eastern Arizona, embrace the climb. That's what I kind of sought out to do when I designed the route. But you should also bring gear that prepares you for temperature swings, especially if you go in late fall. Snow is a possibility on the higher elevations at 10,000 feet. If you go in maybe in the summer, heat will be big in the lower elevations. And if you're not acclimatized to elevation, majority of this route sticks around 8 to 9,000 feet in height. So you will want to give yourself a few days to kind of get used to that. The nice thing is I started in Pine Top and dipped down to the small community of Vernon to try to give riders a day or two of acclimatization. The biggest climbs are near midway and the end of the route, and so that should give you time to transition. So my advice for people looking to ride this route, first, research and educate yourself about the route. Make sure you know where everything is at. I put together some guides. Bikepacking Roots has done a great job of displaying the information on their website. And Ride with GPS, I've also placed a lot of information on there. Make sure you know your familiarity with the Southwest in terms of choosing a good weather window and season. If you're acclimatized to the heat, feel free to go in the summer. If you're a little bit worried about it, go in the autumn, go in that kind of early summer conditions then. And my philosophy when I bike pack is if it feels like work, you're working too hard. So times when I feel like I'm not having a lot of fun or I'm like, man, this is really, really difficult, slow down, eat a snack, take a look at the beauty around you. Go as slow or fast as you want to in order to kind of take it all in. I will mention a few things. There is an event coming up on the route. If you are interested in joining in, it's called a Fear Screen Ride, which is kind of a play on Otto Leopold's famous description of a Mexican gray wolf he shot that kind of transformed him and his conservation ethic. And he said that as the wolf was dying, it had a fierce green fire in her eyes, and kind of in representation of that and where this route is found. I named this event a Fear Screen Ride. It's on September 26th. There's a grand depart. Riders are welcome to ride as fast or as slow as they want to on the route. If you want to like go try to push yourself well, go for it. If you just want to ride and have a great time with others out there, go as slow as you want. But we're going to have that event on September 26th. There is also a shorter version. If you only have a weekend available, that's 100 miles and takes in a nice little taste of this area. I can throw the link for this up in the chat in a bit. Other routes that I've published, just to wrap up here, I do live at the Grand Canyon. I've got a about 250-mile route along the south rim called Capes of the Canyon that goes to different viewpoints. I've got a north rim version that's about 550 miles long. And that one is currently closed though. The Dragon Bravo fire and the White Sage fires have really hit that area. And so portions of the Kaibab National Forest are open, but don't go riding that whole route right now. Gold to Grand, I see Josh is on this Zoom call. He's ridden that with me before. This is in Western Arizona, Eastern Nevada. And that goes through Gold Butte National Monument in Grand Canyon Parashant. House Rock Rap is also located near the North Rim in kind of a more arid area. And I've got a bunch of Grand Canyon overnighters if you want to just take a night or two out in the area. I can also throw these in the chat. Ride with GPS does a great job of providing kind of collections for these different items. And yeah, I will open it up for questions.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I will put in a little plug for Forrest's website if you haven't visited before. We highlight the routes in part of our collection and have some of the information there, but the resources that he has put together for all of his routes are really amazing. I think some of the best that I've seen. So definitely check them out. There's a whole lot more info on the route there. There are just a couple specific questions that we can maybe tackle now before we turn it over to Matt. You talked a lot about water, but there was a question from Joshua about, like, is there a good source for checking status of the water for riding, later this month? Um, Other than finding out what happens after your grand depart.
Yeah, so I always take feedback from riders who have ridden in the area, those who are there most recently. And so right now, the water sources, I do try to rate them based upon like month and what I have seen there over the years, as well as what other riders have seen. Unfortunately, there's no current function, kind of like far out guides where people can kind of update things in real time and kind of throw their stuff on. It has been a drier season in the Southwest. So I would expect a lot of those small streams right now to be running either low to dry. The bigger streams and rivers, they're definitely going to still be there, as well as the lakes. So hope that answers your question.
And then the other question was, has the forest reopened after the Greer fire, or were there impacts to this route because of that?
Yeah, so the Greer Fire happened in early summer this year. There was an initial closure of the area while it occurred. Firefighters did a great job of putting that fire out. This route was relatively unaffected in terms of closures, except for that time when the fire was going on. It will go next to some of the burn zone, but it will not have any direct impacts. And there's been riders on the route since then, and they have not reported any issues. I'll be heading over there actually in a couple of weeks myself to kind of check out some stuff. But no, everything should be good. The only one I can think of is one campground. It's Benny Creek Campground, which I think is closed, but it's right next to the Rolf C. Hoyer Campground, and that one's really big, and that one's open completely.
Those are the only questions now. I think we'll jump over to Matt's presentation. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or the Q&A so you don't forget. And we'll do some more questions at the end. And Matt, you want me to share?
Yes, I'm going to share
something?
Noel's screen. Thank you, Noel.
Now, of course, I see. There it is. I think the share button has disappeared.
Okay, so I'm going to do it slightly different here than Forrest because there's a lot of resources out there currently about the Monumental Loop. There's articles on the Radavist, it's on bikepacking.com, the route's on Bikepacking Roots, New Mexico Magazine, Ryan Van Duzer did an article. So if you're planning a trip on the Monumental Loop, it's fairly easy to gather that planning information with a Google search. So instead, I'm going to sort of walk through what's now been a 15-year process of shaping the route into what it is and how I've stewarded the route over those years and sort of what that process was like and what shaped the changes in the route. It started, like I said, it started as a hiking route roughly in 2009, 2010. And now it's somewhat, I would say, a successful bikepacking route. And there were some trials and tribulations in the middle. Okay, next slide. Here's just some general scenes from the loop. This first one is from one of the first rides on the big loop around 2017, I think, and that's the southern end of the Sierra Vista Trail. It's a 29-mile national recreation trail that parallels the Organ Mountains, which is sort of the backbone of the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument. And this is Square in Mesilla. So the route goes through these desert areas and then also through sort of historic villages in Doñana County. We can go to the next one. You'll see a lot of single speeds here. This bike has gears, but I don't ride a lot of single speeds. Anyway, so Las Cruces is in the northern end of the Chihuahuan Desert. Unlike Arizona, a lot of people get this wrong. We don't have saguaro cactuses here. It's a little more subtle, more serene. At first glance on the highway, it often goes sort of unnoticed and doesn't catch your eye like landscapes of Arizona, like Sedona or the Grand Canyon, both of which I love and spend a lot of time at. One interesting thing on this map, you can see sort of some of the sky islands in Arizona, but we're roughly right on the border there with New Mexico, Texas, and Mexico. You can see most of the Chihuahuan Desert down in Mexico. And we're also in a basin and range geologic area. So you're going to have mountain ranges, generally trending north and south with, 30 to 50 miles of flat basin in between. And that's where the towns are going to be. You can go to the next one. Here's some somewhat wonky images of the 3 versions of the route. A 1.0 is one that I've reserved now only for the criminally insane. I don't recommend it. Do not, we're not going to talk about it much here tonight as a route that you would ride. I'll mention it because it happened and it was part of the process of getting to where we were today. It's not something I recommend people do. It's probably 350 miles. This one in the middle is the current Monumental Loop 2.0 that's on Bikepacking Roots. That one's fantastic. I highly recommend it. And then just last year, I created a Monumental Loop 3.0, which is sort of a combination of 1 and 2, and then includes some stuff further out west in Luna County. All 3 are centered on Las Cruces, New Mexico. Roughly the same riding style, aside from 1.0. That one has more sand, so you're going to need a bigger tire. But again, we're not riding that. We're not thinking about it. No one is excited about it. I'm hoping there's one person who's excited about it. But anyway, they're all about 3,500 to 6,500 feet. And you're going to ride these October to April. Otherwise, it's going to be just have a dream of someone riding this, pulling off like a monsoon season full moon ride and sleeping during the day. But so far, that hasn't happened. On 2.0 and 3.0, we're looking for 2.4-inch tires or bigger. Some folks want suspension. A lot of single speeds get ridden down here for whatever reason, and I encourage that behavior. Unlike Forrest's route where there's water, we have no water. Literally, there's no permanent or perennial water sources on the route at all. There's nothing. There's no flowing streams. There's no lakes. The Rio Grande flows for part of the year through the center of the route. You can see it on the map, sort of flowing from the north down through the south through Las Cruces and then down into El Paso. It's often dry October to April. So even the Rio Grande itself, the 4th largest river in the country, is dry during the prime riding season. So you can't get water there. Sun, we have endless sun. It will be sunny for sure when you're here. Sunscreen is critical. Chapstick is critical. But you're not going to get water. The few times I have seen water have been late summer monsoon storms, and then it's, half sand, so you're not going to be able to use it for anything anyway. Next slide. So yeah, like I mentioned briefly in the introduction, for me, this started in 2009. I just moved to Las Cruces. There was a debate at the time about making what became Organ Mountains Desert Peaks into a wilderness area. There was a lot of opposition to that locally. Essentially, the ranching community and some other folks had the idea that a wilderness designation would be far too restrictive for what they saw for their uses, their historical uses. Their families like to use ATVs. They like to ranch on the land. And there was sort of a narrative that came around that said, if we designate wilderness, we won't be able to do those things. That's not true, but that sort of took hold, and ultimately it was not designated wilderness at that time. And I just moved here and I thought, well, I want to participate in this wilderness debate. And as a thru hiker, I thought the best way for me to start participating is to get to know the land. So I had the idea to sort of connect all of those areas with a big hike. And like I said, it's basin and range area. So we have these mountain ranges, which roughly are in the orange on these maps. And then the areas in between are the basins. So the hiking in the ranges was amazing. And then on the basins, it was dry and hot and relatively boring. So the idea sort of got shelved for a few years until 2013, when Surly Bikes came out with the Krampus, which had 3-inch tires. So now those basin areas, which are somewhat sandy, all of a sudden are rideable. They hadn't been before. No one was riding bikes there, but those roads that sort of cross the basin are pretty attractive on a bike. And then you can hit 2, 3, 4 small mountain ranges in a day. And the idea of this hiking route sort of comes back to the front of my mind, and I start using Google Maps and slowly piecing it together with a series of day rides, checking things out. Like Forrest said, going down, seeing a dead end, checking it out again, and finding what I thought at the time was the best way through. Shortly after that started in May of 2014, it was designated a national monument. So then Oregon Mountains Desert Peaks is a national monument, roughly 500,000 acres, which is a huge area, surrounds Las Cruces. And then a lot of the areas on that map that are not in the highlighted area are still BLM land. So there's, another 200,000 acres of BLM land outside of the monument within the county. I'd like to thank Obama for that. That's a thanks, Obama, in the sarcastic way that people like to say it. But in this instance, it was a wonderful thing for the town of Las Cruces. We had already had prehistoric trackways, a very small monument on the northwest side of town, where there were some tracks, some Paleozoic trackways of creatures and fossilized plants. It's probably 50,000 acres, I think, and is mainly home to a lot of OHV roads, and that's how it gets used primarily. And then in 2019, 10 areas, about half of the monument, 10 wilderness areas were designated within OMDP. So now half of the monument is wilderness, and that somewhat shaped the route. It didn't make too much of an impact. A few roads were closed that we did like to ride. None of them were on the loop at that time. And the Monumental Loop borders 6 of the 10 wilderness areas, which is exciting. And I encourage people to park their bike and get off and hike into some of those areas. There's some attractions like Aden Crater and Kilbourne Hole that are in the wilderness areas that you can see on foot with a fairly short hike. All right, next. All right, so here's a few things that make Oregon Mountains Desert Peak special, and this is why it was designated as a monument. It's rich in archaeological sites, so there's petroglyphs. Like this is one of my favorite ones, sort of a leopard man thing. But they're all over the monument. There's also rare and endemic plants, especially in the Oregon Mountains. There's a chipmunk that's only found there. There's a evening primrose that's again only found in the Oregon Mountains. There's some wildlife. This is my daughter here, doing a great job of impersonating wildlife. There has been a recent bighorn sheep introduction, which is sort of what she's looking like here in the mountains south, and I assume that they will end up sort of migrating north into the monument again at some point. There's NASA testing sites where they tested lunar rovers in sort of some of the sandy, rocky conditions that are similar to the moon in a lot of ways. And there's other geologic features, slot canyons, volcanic craters. Each mountain range there's 6 in the monument. Each one is sort of its own unique geologic area. And there's paleontological things have been found, like a giant ground sloth, sort of some of those ancient creatures. The original Loop 1.0 went by a place where mammoths would sort of rub themselves against these rocks, and they're rubbed smooth from mammoths, which is fairly neat to see. And then lots of historical sites. The Butterfield Trail, which was a mail trail from St. Louis to San Diego, ran through here in the mid-1800s. There's the Civil War sites. World War II aerial bombing targets are all throughout the monument. So there's a lot of history, essentially, dating back to prehistorical times. All right, next. So with the monument being designated in 2014, and being 4 distinct units, I'd been working on this idea to tie them all together into one big tour. So somebody could come, bring their bike, and see sort of the whole monument. And it's tough with one line to see everything. All the best trails, the CDT, the Colorado Trail, they all pass by things that day hikers would want to see just in an effort to get somewhere. But I tried my best to include everything into a full tour, and that was the main guiding principle of Loop 1.0. Just to see all the most beautiful places of Oregon Mountains Desert Peaks. That meant it was 350 miles, and nobody really liked it. That was sort of the consequence of that design philosophy. Was it wasn't super successful. People came down from Alaska, and they loved it because Alaskans are hardy and tough, and it was warm down here, and they enjoyed it. Local people often were sort of cursing my name and why, trying to understand why I'd made the decisions I did. I told him I was focused primarily on visitors from out of town and seeing if they, you know, trying to give them sort of the full picture of Doñana County and the monument. But essentially it had limited appeal. I think more people from Alaska, you know, maybe a couple dozen finished it. And my friend Haley and I were the only ones from Las Cruces who rode Loop 1.0 in one go. Yes, and there were a few access issues, and this is something that came up and that I didn't appreciate when it first happened with the BLM, was the difference between me riding somewhere and me posting a route online for other people to ride. So they were okay with me riding it and my friends riding it, but they sort of drew the line at, we'd rather you not post it on bikepacking.com, which is where Loop 1.0 was first posted. So that sort of, you know, got me engaged with the BLM, those small access issues, and trying to figure out what they did like and what would be suitable to post versus suitable to ride. So, all right, next slide. So at that same time, it's sort of, I have this route that I think is lovely and should be embraced by the community. It seemed like such a good idea. It wasn't really working. So to try to get people excited about it, I started hosting weekly gravel rides, sort of monthly campouts on the loop, all in an effort to get people engaged with the monument and other places besides the Organs. Everybody was visiting the Organs. We all rode in the Doñana Mountains, but everything west of the river, kind of the two main areas of the monument, were unknown even to local people. People weren't going out there to ride. They weren't going out there to hike. So I'm doing all this sort of community building thing around bikepacking. And there wasn't a bikepacking community here when I started. A few of us rode, maybe 6 or 8, and we rode, but I was trying to grow it to where it was, I guess I believed bikepacking was the best way to see Organ Mountains Desert Peaks. So I wanted to sort of spread the gospel, so to speak, on bikepacking. And about 2018, I think I joined Bikepacking Roots as a regional advisor to reach out to Kurt and Kate to try to get some help with those access issues and see if they could help with the BLM, you know, because I was new to that, and see if they could help me sort of navigate that federal process and make everybody happy. So it was a lot of campouts, a lot of rides, super successful, but still nobody was riding Loop 1.0. We had talks, we had slideshows, and everybody liked the idea, but they weren't really riding it. And then I think in 2020, after sort of a long series of emails, feedback from people saying, we appreciate what you're doing, it's just too hard. In 2020, Brad Bingham and his wife Hannah came from Colorado. He's a frame builder, builds wonderful titanium frames in Colorado. And they're super strong riders, and they were riding the route, and there's an Instagram post of Hannah sort of 30 miles into the ride north of town, breaking down and crying. And at the time, I just I see the video, I open Ride with GPS, and I say, all right, we've had enough. Let's see if I can fix this into something that can be enjoyable and can be, you know, an asset for the community. And that sort of shifted my whole mindset. Instead of just making a route, I wanted to sort of add something to my community. And we've had the designation of the monument, we've had the designation of the wilderness, and then I sort of see the loop as tying that all together and being sort of a third ribbon, you know, around this public land, and sort of a third expression of how much we love this place. So in a matter of minutes, after seeing that video, I've got Loop 2.0 essentially mapped out with Ride with GPS, because I'd ridden everything previously in an effort to get 1.0 as best I could get it. So it took me, you know, maybe 30 minutes on Ride with GPS to get a route. And I was sort of kicking myself that I hadn't done that much earlier. Because instantly, you know, that was sort of at the end of the season, I announced that we have this new route. And then the next season, when everybody started to come, it was 180 degrees different. Everyone loved the route. They're eating tacos every 50 miles. They're having a great time in the difficult sections of the monument, because they're broken up by some nice sections in between. And then we started hosting some bigger events at that time. This is my friend Grace at the start of one of our events. Certain sections of the route are suitable for everybody. My kids walk to school on the Monumental Loop every day. So, all right, next slide. Yeah, so once I made the switch to 2.0, first of all, it went from 350 miles to 250 miles, and almost all of that, probably 60 of those miles that I cut were deep sand, and the other 40 were big rocks. So it was stuff that no one wanted to ride anyway, despite it being beautiful and remote, and there was a lot of solitude. No one missed that 100 miles. So now we have a route that's much more manageable. People can do it in 4 to 7 days, depending. A guy from Albuquerque went as fast as 19 hours on Loop 2.0. I definitely don't recommend that. But once I have a route that now is attracting riders from all over the country, all over the world, and is slowly becoming sort of part of the community. It's not just an idea that I have, it's something that everyone in town has started to sort of rally around, and wants to see protected in some way or designated in some way. It meant going to a lot more meetings, which I didn't see any of this coming when I first made a route. I thought I'll make a fun bikepacking route. I'll be a fun bike guy, and there'll be a route, and that'll be the end of it. But instead, it's been now 10 years of sort of. I mean, I'm on the board of Bikepacking Roots, and I think this is how it happened. Just sort of saying yes to anything I can do to sort of lift up the Monumental Loop and Doñana County. It's a economically depressed area. We don't have a lot of the resources in New Mexico go to northern New Mexico. So I sort of see this as a win for the community if we can have this thing that brings people together. So I was still doing a lot of community engagement, hosting rides, attending meetings, partnering with Friends of Organ Mountains Desert Peaks to host more events. Part of this, trying to bring in as many people as I can to the idea that the loop can be a valuable asset to the community. A big part of that is the reroute now goes through, Loop 2.0 goes through every small town in Doñana County. And I'm encouraging everybody who goes through, we have sort of an unspoken or a spoken rule, I guess. It's fairly strict. It's our only rule that when you go to a restaurant, you leave a big tip and you buy and eat a burrito, and then you buy a second one to put in your frame bag. That's sort of our only rule. So it's a 2 burrito rule. No one complains about that one at all. And it makes a big difference. Those small business owners during loop season, they notice, and then they reach out to me and say, hey, we're seeing all these people with bikes. What's going on? And then they're invested in the route and want to see it succeed as well. All right, next. Here's just a couple of shots from Loop 2.0. These are the monument sections. On the far right, we've got Sierra Vista Trail. That's in early April. And it's sort of an ideal time if you're down to handle warmer weather to ride the route. It can be 90 degrees at that time, 95, and again we're full sun at about 4,000 feet elevation, so 95 degrees is going to feel fairly hot, but you do get more color on the landscape at that time. Most people aren't going to ride it in April. It's sort of an October to early April thing, but I do recommend, if you want to see flowers, shoot for that April time. The middle picture there is the Doñana trails. That's the most popular mountain bike trails in the area. Nice flowy single track. It's sort of single track gravel. If you've ridden Midwest gravel, the best Midwest gravel, it's this, but just in a nice flowy trail through the mountains, which to me is quite exciting. And then there's another one of the Doñana Mountains with some, we call that area Green Rock. That's on Loop 2.0 and very close to town. So those sections in the monument tend to be a little more difficult. Some of them sort of extremely difficult, and then there's sections in between that are less so. We can go to the next one. So still the goal of Loop 2.0 was to highlight all 4 units of Organ Mountains Desert Peaks, same as Loop 1.0, but to sort of scale it back and try to include more of the story of the people of Doñana County and sort of more of the villages of Doñana County, and cut out some of the stuff that that people were enjoying. So you can see here on the right, that's a fairly faint rocky road. That's the hardest section of the route. It's called White Gap Pass for that white rock in the distance there. You can see that from town, but it feels extremely remote when you're out there. But it's, you know, a beautiful, beautiful area. And then on the left is the Robledo Mountains. There's an arroyo. We often camp in arroyos because we're camping sort of not during monsoon season. They tend to be the flattest, least vegetated areas, and it has the least impact on the land. In the summer, that's obviously not a great idea. But when you're here riding, it tends not to rain enough to fill an arroyo. And then, you know, we've been camping out here for years, and some of the camps we've used over and over in an arroyo, you can't tell that anyone's been there. So leave no trace is a big part of what we're doing for sure as bikepackers. All right, we can go to the next. Yeah, so you've got those 4 units of OMDP, roughly making a figure 8 around Las Cruces at the center. I toyed with the idea of doing one big loop, but the lack of water makes that tough, and people want to come back through. Some people only ride one loop and do a 125-mile tour and then come back the next year and do the other one. So the figure 8 pattern sort of made sense. Yeah, so now roughly every 50 miles, except for one section that's 90, you're going to go through a small, often historic village in Doñana County, and everyone has delicious Mexican food. Some of the best food you've had anywhere. This burrito on the right here is from a gas station. They make burritos right there. Wonderful place. So you're going to hit Main Street of, you know, 6 or 7 little villages. And those sections tend to be mellow gravel. I still tried to stick to dirt because it's safer. Traffic isn't enjoyable to ride in. But they are like a break from the more demanding sections in the National Monument. And you get a bunch of food. All right, next. Yeah, so last year we have Loop 2.0. It's going great. It's highlighting Organ Mountains, Desert Peaks. We've got all the support. And then there was another sort of debate sparked in the time at Luna County, sort of the county to the west of Doñana County. And I got wind of it through Friends of Organ Mountains, Desert Peaks. They originally talked about expanding Organ Mountains, Desert Peaks to Luna County. And then they said, no, we're going to rename it another name, Mimbres Peaks National Monument. It'll be its own monument. Sort of the same thing happened here. There's been a lot of local pushback. There's people who mine over there, people who ranch, and they said, no, we don't want a national monument. We want to regain control of our public land. We don't want to be restricted. I don't think a national monument is restrictive to the things they're doing, and I think, in fact, it isn't. But their attitude is still a little bit against having a monument designation in Luna County. But anyway, I made the route through what would be and what still may be designated as Mimbres Peaks National Monument. And so it adds 4 new mountain ranges to the 6 that are in Organ Mountains, Desert Peaks. And I tied it together in one big loop this time because it goes through Deming, another small town out west of Las Cruces, about 50 miles west of Las Cruces. It's a 365-mile route, and it really highlights everything that southern New Mexico has to offer. This picture on the right are some petroglyphs that are just off the route from roughly the year 800. And the same series of petroglyphs, there's, you know, pictures of jaguars and macaws and, you know, sort of other Central Mexican imagery that shows that in the year 800 they were, you know, in contact with people from as far south as Central Mexico, which is super exciting to me. Those aren't marked on the map. That's one thing the BLM has, again, asked me not to do. You can find information about that stuff online and other places, but they don't want me to post those on the routes. Sometimes people ask me, and I'm kind enough to tell them, you know, roughly the direction to go. So if you are riding the route, it's helpful to any of the routes, 2 or 3. It's helpful to reach out to me ahead of time if you want some of that local knowledge. All right, next. All right, so one of the things I mentioned that I started doing as early as 2017, I think, was hosting the Danger Bird. It's a group start on the route, similar to Forrest, what he's doing later this month. It started with maybe 7 people, I think, on Loop 1.0, and sort of stayed in that, 7 to 25 people area as long as I left it on Loop 1.0. Once we had Loop 2.0, we worked with the BLM to get permits, to get insurance. We partnered with Oregon Mountains Desert Peaks and Visit Las Cruces. And the event has now grown where we have, I think, 250 people signed up. We have a summit. It's similar to the Bikepacking Roots summits that you've seen other places. There's ones coming up in Colorado, if anybody is interested this weekend. Yeah, so we host this ride every year where we have, now 200 people come to Las Cruces. It's a non-competitive event. It's a group start centered on building community. Again, it's all about getting people together, connecting them with each other and the landscape. That's sort of the tagline we use. It's a non-competitive event. Sometimes people go fast, but we just want to encourage everybody to get out there. Part of that is we also host a safety bird, which is a shorter guided overnight to one of the 4 units of the monument. For people who are newer to bikepacking, we're going to loan them gear. We're going to have a educated guide with them, some vehicle support, and then people get into bikepacking. We've seen a lot of people do the safety bird and then graduate to doing the Danger Bird. The naming thing, don't ask. It's sort of a long story, but we're going to say that this Roadrunner here is the Danger Bird, or sort of the mascot for the event. Recently, we had a high school outdoor club do something called the Baby Bird, and I was able to ride my cargo bike and support them as they rode from their school, from their high school, onto the Monumental Loop and out into the monument. So to see kids using it and to see local folks embrace the route, to me, that's the successful route. Before, when it was a few people would come and visit, it didn't feel like a success. And I think for me, that's how I'm defining success: is local folks, especially young people, see the route as something of value. Businesses see it as something of value. Elected officials see value in it. And for me, that's a successful route. That's taken 10 years of effort and way more meetings than I care to attend to make that happen. So I don't think every route steward needs to do that level of engagement. But I think to be a route steward, you have to be connected to the place where you're making the route. And if you have that and you know the community, I think you're off to a good start. If you're flying into someplace new that you've never been and you think this is a great route and you want to post it, I think you can do that successfully, but it's much more difficult. I'm riding parts of this route, every week, and the whole route every year. So I think that's important if you're going to be a route steward, to let it be a place that you're going to come back to and invest in over time. Here's just some people enjoying our events. I've hosted other sort of day rides on the route, using portions of it. 100-mile ride every year we do in the spring, and it's been a lot of fun. The main thing I'm working on now is trying to get the loop recognized through the BOLT Act. It's not a designation of any sort, it's just recognition. And I think the thing that this would bring would be signage and sort of a defined route on the ground. So people could come and visit it more easily and follow the route just using the signage. And I think it would also, if I had signage through the little communities throughout Doñana County, people would say, oh, I am using the Monumental Loop. I didn't know much about it, but now I'm seeing these signs. I'm taking my kids to school on it. I'm riding with my family. I'm part of it. And I hope that can spark their curiosity to say, well, I'm walking on mile 17 every day. Well, what does mile 200 look like? Or what does it look like at mile 47? To sort of spark that engagement with the route and get more people excited about it. There are parts that everybody can use every day, bikepackers obviously included, but equestrians, OHV users, hikers, and it gets a ton of use if you look at it from that perspective. Like I said, we do a walking school bus where the kids meet and then walk a mile to school, and that happens on the Monumental Loop. I would love for those kids to see a sign that says, mile 17 of the Monumental Loop, and sort of get them excited about exploring the desert around them. All right, next. So I do have some other routes in the area, like I said, primarily in southern New Mexico. The one that's on Bikepacking Roots currently is Rollin' and Tumblin'. It's a route in the Lincoln National Forest near Cloudcroft, New Mexico, about an hour and a half from here, but a much different area. It's more like sort of what Forrest was showing. High elevation, 700 to 9,500 feet, still not much water, but there are a few springs up there. And that route's been very popular. I host a group start on that as well every May. So if you want to come ride that one with a group, the group start's a great way to do it. But that route's open essentially at the time that the Monumental Loop is closed. It's sort of an opposite season. So there's always somewhere to go bikepacking. It's about an hour and a half from Las Cruces. So as the gets too hot to ride the loop, you can head up and ride Rollin' and Tumblin'. There's a couple other routes we've been working on. I'm working with a bike shop in Silver City, obviously, which is on the Tour Divide, to connect Las Cruces to Silver City. And then that connects over to the Western Wildlands route and the Arizona Trail. And then all these routes will sort of create this big network, is the idea. Loop 3.0 already gets onto an alternate, ACA alternate of the Great Divide mountain bike route. So we're sort of connected there, but trying to connect to Silver City on something called the New Butterfield Trail, which follows the historic Butterfield Trail most of the way to Silver City, and it also follows 3.0. So it's overlap a little bit, but there's some connections getting into Silver City that we're working on. There's also a new one that I'm hoping to scout this fall called O Capitan, My Capitan, which is sort of a play on the Civil War poem about President Lincoln and his assassination. It's the Capitan Mountains. The poem is called O Captain, My Captain, which I do know how to spell. It's obviously Capitan here because it circles around a small mountain range called the Capitan Mountains near Ruidoso. And then I'm looking at some stuff out on Otero Mesa, which is a grassland. A lot of the Chihuahuan Desert used to be grassland. It was overgrazed sort of in the late 1800s, and now drought has reduced a lot of it to mesquite and creosote bush. But Otero Mesa still has a lot of native grassland and pronghorn and other things out there that are more what we would have seen sort of 200 years ago. So that's an exciting area. Neither of those, those bottom three are not finished and available. But when they are, they'll be posted on Bikepacking Roots. And I would recommend you create routes and post them on Bikepacking Roots. Anyway, next. That was it. Here's us doing one of our fun campouts. If you have questions, I would love to answer them. And I would also really like it if you supported Bikepacking Roots in any way that you can. Attend our events, donate money, share things on Instagram, whatever it could be. Noelle is working constantly to lift this organization up, and I think we're doing great work. So we would appreciate your support.
Thanks, man. Thanks to both of y'all. Now I want to come ride both of your routes. I was lucky enough to come out and lead the Safety Bird 2 years ago and get a taste of the Monumental Loop, and I've been wanting to come back, but it'll happen. So my long list of places to ride. Awesome. Well, we have just a couple of questions and just a couple more minutes left. There's a question from Jim for either route. Is there any advice if you wanted to drive in and camp and do day rides for someone that is not wanting to do a full bikepacking adventure?
Yes, you'll see right behind Noelle, there's a poster for the Gravel Adventure Field Guide, which is essentially a small guide to visit Las Cruces paid for that has, 20 gravel rides. I made 18 of them, and they're essentially just broken up sections of the Monumental Loop for people to ride. So yes, that's the way to go. Hit Gravel Adventure Field Guide. I think you can Google them. I don't know if they have a website. They're definitely on Instagram, and they'll send you a free guide for Doñana County.
And you probably have some advice if they reached out with places to kind of base camp or park. They were doing something like that.
Yeah, I try to be real clear that I always will answer emails and DMs and everything and help you plan your trip. So if you want to come and you want to ride the Monumental Loop, but you've only got 45 millimeter tires, send me a message and I'll make you a route where 45 millimeter tires will be perfect. So yes, I love people reaching out with questions, but yes, parking, places to eat, places to stay, it's all easy here in Las Cruces.
For my route, I'd say in terms of being able to access with a vehicle, it's fairly easy. Most of the dirt roads in this area are very car friendly, even two-wheel drive. My best piece of advice would be to actually reach out to the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest office. My route does big loops, and if you see a area where you think you could easily cut a loop and make kind of a smaller day ride or an overnighter, it's very possible. And if you are curious about whether your car would be passable in that area, they'd be more than willing to help work with you. And you're also welcome to reach out to me, and I can do my best to help you as well.
Awesome. And then I think there was a question about Danger Bird for this year. Is that it happens in first we can you could give details when it is. I don't know if there's still any registration spots available.
Yeah. Danger Bird and Safety Bird are November 7th. We have what we used to call the New Mexico Bikepacking Summit on November 6th. It's some local New Mexico bike bag handlebar makers and artists, and we all meet together in the park and sort of talk about the next day's or the weekend's ride. A few speakers will share stuff about public lands. Somebody from the BLM will tell us how to leave no trace and visit those archaeological sites respectfully and correctly. And then November 7th, the Danger Bird starts, and November 8th is the Safety Bird, November 8th and 9th. And there's no time limit on it. On the Danger Bird, you can ride Loop 2.0, you can ride Loop 3.0 and be out there as long as you want. We have aid stations on the route. It's the one time where there will be more water out there. So that's a good time to ride it. The information is on Friends of Oregon Mountains Desert Peaks website. All of the events are currently full, but we do keep a wait list. So, it's likely that spaces will open up before the event.
Yeah, we can share some links out afterwards I think the Safety Bird is full for this year, right? Is what you were saying as well. But yeah, that does happen every year. And so we can point you to the websites, and if you follow along on social media or things, you can get the advanced knowledge for next year to sign up. A question about scorpions and snakes. That's a good question.
Yeah, we do have them. Luckily, during the time of year when people are riding, sort of that October to April, you're not likely to see many. Normally, there's 1 or 2 snake sightings during the Danger Bird when we have 200 people out there. But it's not an issue, really. I've seen as many as 12 on an evening ride. Rattlesnakes all on the trail. Never had an issue. I often sleep out with no shelter during Danger Bird season or during Monumental Loop season with no issues. You don't need a tent. You don't need a bivvy. You don't need anything. During the warmer months, it is an issue. You will see a lot of scorpions, centipedes, sort of the big 8-inch long desert centipedes. That's unpleasant, but thankfully us locals have to deal with that. And if you're coming to visit and you're coming during the right time of year, you won't have much of an issue, which is nice because then you can skip the tent in lieu of carrying more water. And I guess I will add that we do have water on the route in the form of cattle tanks. So ranchers will have cattle tanks pumping groundwater up to water their cattle, and you can occasionally filter from those tanks. So there is water out there in emergency use, and it's filterable and totally fine. So you don't have to ride 250 miles without water. I didn't want to give the wrong impression there.
And all the towns, right?
And all the towns, yeah. I 4 liters of water, 4 to 6, depending, is generally max if you're hitting during a hot spell, and not wanting to filter cattle tank water.
Forrest, anything you want to add about wildlife critters on your route?
Be bear aware. On my route, bears are common, and it is something you'll need to take into account when you're storing your food at night. It's actually a requirement at the Apache Sickeries National Forest. So you can carry canister, or there's like modern kind of bags that are bear resistant that are fairly light. Highly suggest it.
Forrest probably knows this as well as anybody being in the Grand Canyon. It's generally rodents that will cause the biggest problem.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, and they're small and hard to deal with. But so if you can hang your food here to get it away from the rodents, that's advisable. Or open your zippers so they at least don't ruin your frame bag and ruin your food.
Awesome. That's all the questions I saw, and I think we're almost about time. So we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thank you so much to both of y'all. Those were awesome presentations, and I really learned a lot and am inspired to get out there and ride. So yeah, we'll send out an email in the next couple days with the recording. This will get up on our YouTube at some point. And I'll ask both Matt and Forrest if they have any links that they want to share to point you to different resources. We'll point you to the route pages and other things to help you plan a trip. Any final words y'all want to say?
No, thanks everybody.
Thank you so much. Support Bikepacking Roots.
Yes, we would love for y'all to participate in our fundraiser. That'd be great. All right, thanks everyone. Have a great night.
Thanks, Noel.
Thank you, Noel.